I think just realizing that where we may have at one point looked at our watch for a presentation of the gospel that would be transformational in the life of a person, it's more now looking at our calendar and realizing that this is weeks and months and years that it will take for people to oftentimes embrace a faith that is very different than the culture in which we find ourselves.
Yeah. Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
The journey to the Pacific Northwest, I think, was equal parts spiritual and practical, maybe. Yeah. We just started asking ourselves, like, where's a place that we could settle for the long haul and, like, raise a family and, like, really invest in and church plant potentially. And so, yeah, that was a process of discernment. But what ended up happening was we left Southern California, we quit our jobs, and we actually, like, took a hiatus and spent 4 months, like, traveling around the world before we even decided where we wanted to settle.
We took our, like, 6 belongings that we had as a young married couple and put them in Madison's parents' garage, and we did a backpacking trip for 4 months. Started at PDX and ended up going all the way around the world, basically staying with friends and friends of friends, missionaries, pastors, just followers of Jesus, trying to live their life and love their neighbor in different cultures and contexts. And that, without a doubt, was one of the most formative experiences for us, not just in ministry, but really just in our faith. To go from Haiti to Western Europe to West Africa to the Philippines, Australia, it at times felt so jarring because the buildings that we would meet in, the songs that we would sing felt so different from each other. And yet there was this common thread that kept emerging of just ordinary people loving their literal neighbors and sharing the gospel wherever they went.
So Apartment Life was it's an organization that places people in apartment communities that really want an event coordinator. So they're essentially like contracted employees that get to plan events for the apartment and really foster community because apartment and businesses know that community like keeps people. Sure. So it's kind of a retention strategy for them. Yeah. But on the other hand, Apartment Life is also a ministry that is intentionally placing Christians in these buildings so that they can like love people around them. Yeah. So our first home in Portland was this funny, pretty bougie, like apartment on the water up on Hayden Island.
Nice. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we got to spend 2 years there. Yeah. Really like, yes, planning events, but really getting to know our neighbors. And we did a lot of like inviting them over for dinner, sending them a card when they got a promotion at work, like sending them flowers when they lost a loved one, like just really like tangible fostering of relationships and getting to know people and their hurts and their pains and their joys. Yeah. And I think and that was kind of a really cool cultural experience of Portland too.
Oh, I bet.
Because we learned through that process that like people were not going to come to church with us. Like we invited people no, not a thing.
So you're doing Apartment Life, Hayden Island.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're embedded in a church.
Yes.
Knowing that you're going to church plant.
Yes. Hoping. Yeah.
Okay. But that's the plan.
Like that's
kind of, you had that vision already.
Right.
And so you're basically in this like intensive educational learning season.
Yes.
And that was a key takeaway was
key takeaway was like people were not interested in like walking into our church building, but they were highly interested in having spiritual conversations with us. They were like, not a problem with that.
Yeah. Our church is named Kainos Church. And began in 2021. We'd finished our residency at the church where we had been working, and they commissioned us out. And we started gathering at our home. We had one house church community, and a couple of folks had come with us had kind of been sent out from our sending church, and just some other friends from the city. And so we started meeting.
Can I make a point about the name real quick?
Yeah.
Kainos is Kainos. And the reason that it's named this weird Greek word is because we actually stumbled upon a coffee shop in Portland with that name. And we actually happened to be on a prayer walk at the time that we stumbled upon this coffee shop. We were specifically praying for God to do something fresh in Portland. And people often like come to Portland in our experience to find something fresh, like to leave their, Midwestern values or to get a new job or to like literally experience the fresh air of the Pacific Northwest. And so we were kind of just like intrigued by this word, Kainos. And
prior to seeing the coffee shop?
No, coffee shop introduced us this word.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we stumbled upon, we were praying for something fresh, stumbled upon the coffee shop, and we were like, what's this word? And we looked it up, and it means fresh.
Yeah. As we were praying specifically, God, would you do something new and fresh in us? So we were like,
so that was
whoa.
wild. Yeah. And so we just couldn't shake that word and that idea that like, though house church is not new, it's literally like ancient. It feels like a fresh take on church for a lot of people that we were coming into contact with.
Probably one of my favorite things about the Pacific Northwest is the ingenuity, the creativity, and the ability to start something that is new and fresh and invite people into that. And having grown up in the Midwest, in the Bible Belt, and then moving out here, I love not just the creativity that the church is so often willing to lean into with the kind of this missionary mindset, but also this like we are building something together. We're building a kingdom culture that is not about any one specific church, but it's about the kingdom. And N.T. Wright was in Portland recently, and he was commenting on how awesome he thought it was seeing these pastors and leaders and believers gathered together and this spirit of like teamwork for the kingdom. And I had always maybe just thought that was my own experience coming from a different part of the country. So to hear someone that I respect so deeply say, and that really is a beautiful gift that this region has and is trying to tap into, that is not just for hockey culture in the Pacific Northwest, but it's for kingdom culture in the Pacific Northwest, that we want to build something together that's bigger and greater than any one church community. And I think that that has been one of the coolest things about meeting this new friend, Dan Mayhew, or other house church leaders, is that there's been a desire to help each other out for the sake of the kingdom coming in Portland and the Pacific Northwest as it is in heaven. And if there's anything that he could do to support us or vice versa, he's offered that. And I think we feel the same way for anyone who is already pastoring a house church, is thinking about planting a house church, becoming a part of a house church. As you've probably heard through this conversation, we're learning as we go. Right. But I think one of my favorite things is that spirit of we're building something for the kingdom together. Yeah. And that's why I love, one of the many reasons why I love getting not only to live in this area, but to be a part of kingdom work in this area.
I have been working 16 years with Alpha here in the Portland area and helping churches to that have a heart to evangelistically engage the community in a way that, again, feels culturally appropriate. Alpha comes out of a church in London 30 years ago, and I think in many ways the culture that we find ourselves in here in the Northwest today is very well matched to what it was, 20, 30 years ago in the heart of London there. So I think Alpha in its own DNA, I think kind of takes on a secular, progressive, post-Christian space. And so I think it finds a real home here and has become, I would say in my 15 years with Alpha, has become even more a part of what is needed in the church, what is needed in the culture for a connection to the gospel.
Okay. And so just remind us again of your role with Alpha in the Portland area.
So I'm a strategic director for our city, work with Alpha as, kind of helping to support churches that want to do Alpha and, helping them to do it in such a way that no matter what church a person stepped into for Alpha, hopefully they would find the same kind of radical hospitality, the same kind of posture of openness to their questions, concerns, ideas, as well as then kind of a dependence on the Holy Spirit that would give them a space. I had a friend of mine that her description of Alpha I thought was really helpful. Just 5 words. She said, Alpha is Holy Spirit directed self-discovery.
Okay, so kind of to our conversation today about spiritual hunger and connecting with skeptics, you even alluded to this a minute ago, but what do you think now about let's say the level of skepticism? How does that, what's that look like right now in comparison to where it's been for Portland in your opinion?
Yeah. I would say that in what I'm seeing, I think skepticism is actually maybe coming down a bit over the last 10 years. And I think it's being replaced in some ways by apathy.
Okay.
So the skepticism about, again, even when I moved to Portland 20 years ago, being a pastor had a real label that was kind of put the guard up when my neighbors found out that we're not, followers of Jesus. And so coming to a space where now I don't think there's as much hesitancy about stepping into those kind of conversations, those kind of relationships with people. So I would say moving out of the skepticism where there's a real judgment against me being a Christian to like, oh, that's great for you. That's nice. It's kind of like just another thing that I'm apathetic. I don't really care about it. It doesn't really affect me.
Yeah. Do you think that's progress or regress?
I would say it's tough to say. I think that is a good question there. What do you think? Is that a progression or is that?
I mean, I can only speak really from what I can see, right? In my perspective, it seems like progress to me because maybe there's just what I can see is there's a little less emotional resistance to having a conversation. And so maybe there is a little more opportunity to tease out than the spiritual hunger. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think the church has done a good job. Christians have done a good job of trying to at least here in Portland be a little bit more representative of Jesus. I think one of the big questions that seems to be shifting, and I think this is really true with young people especially, is moving away from the questions about the validity of Jesus and whether or not the truth about God, and asking the question: is God good? Is Jesus good? Is the way of Jesus good? And I think that question of looking and asking that question about if I were to embrace Jesus, is that actually good for me? Is it good for my family that I know? Is it good for the community around me? And I think that shift around just the view of Jesus and such is one of the big shifts that I think we've got to kind of grapple with. And then the journey to truth is less about some principled, idea, and more about the personal experience that people have. And so I think the invitation for church planters, for us as pastors and church leaders, is how do we help our people to invite people to take take a step towards God in as simple of a way as praying and seeing if God would answer that prayer, of looking at Scripture and seeing what would happen. And so I think that encounter with Christ really becomes the persuasive part of our apologetic more than again some series of truth statements that they've got to grapple with or hold to. Those they're both still relevant, but I think the journey to truth is coming much more through that person's experience. And so does this prove to live out in, is Jesus good in my life, becomes the relevant
Very interesting.
question.
So you're kind of saying it's not that truth seeking as a discipline is irrelevant.
No.
It's just that maybe the order in which we pursue these things could be addressed, and maybe we go first for the relational experience with a God who is good, that we know is good.
Well, and I think what becomes persuasive is less that they come to this aha moment that this is true, and more that they experience it as true, that it actually does fit the reality of their life. And so I think, the journey to faith is definitely a longer one than it was 15, 20, 25 years ago. So I think just realizing that where we may have at one point looked at our watch for a presentation of the gospel that would be transformational in the life of a person, it's more now looking at our calendar and realizing that this is weeks and months and years that it will take for people to oftentimes embrace a faith that is very different than the culture in which we find ourselves.
Yeah. Wow. That resonates with me as a pastor who's been in the same church for 27 years and have watched some of this transition that you're talking about. And I really like that comparison of we were looking at our watches, now we're looking at our calendars. That's a great way to frame it and gives us some of the patience that we might need.
It's a long game. I think
Yeah.
we have to approach these conversations with that in mind, that it's not going to happen in a moment.
One of my friends a number of years ago was sharing with me that, before Sunday mornings, he would often stay up the entire night, like working on his sermon and wrestling through anxiety and kind of the pressure of that. And the guy kind of chuckled and he said, well, for me, it was Friday nights because we had church on Saturday, but very similar kind of experience up till 2 or 3 in the morning. And so you combine kind of this unique dynamic where you're working tons and tons of hours. You have really high demands. And oftentimes in a church plant, the spouse is also like a staff person, but rarely paid.
Yeah.
And so you've got like husband and wife team doing all the things 7 days a week. And where is there space for family?
Out of the blue, I felt the Lord ask me, if this church doesn't grow, will you feel like a failure? And grow, I knew he meant move from the 50 that we started with 2 years ago to more people.
Yeah.
And as I answered, in the answering, it was like I answered, yes, I would feel like a failure. And at the same moment realized, wrong answer.
Yeah.
And what came to me was, if he asked me that about my kids, Abe, if you only have 2 kids, will you feel like a failure? And I said, yes. That would be weird. And all of us here would be like, why?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be good to raise 2 healthy children up in the Lord than to count that you have 14 of them? Like, what a weird thing to count. But I think it highlighted for me in that moment, even just the fundamental presumption I have about success as a pastor, that somehow 50 people cared for well, like growing in the Lord, is somehow not even on the list of ways that I would say God would tell me, well done.
Yeah.
I think one factor that influences that too, just to mention, is the church in North America. One of our greatest contributions to church history is that we've developed church as business. And so when we think of like business in the US, bigger is better, whether you go lateral or franchise or keep it corporate.
Up and to the right. I went to Willow Creek one year and Bill Hybels was like, oh, we're always up and to the right, And now that it's so sad to think about now.
Yeah.
Like 12 years later.
Or even
that was.
Hillsong's contribution for a while there. Their vision was, better days, better things ahead. Kind of a concept. And that kind of concept, I think, or that ethos of church has to be bigger and better and greater complexity influences the pressures that pastors feel, I think.
Yeah.
And that's what I've experienced. I would add to that, the isolation is compounded, like thinking you have to have all the answers, thinking you can't show any signs of weakness. And then sometimes, like, depending on our biblical worldview, maybe we think that things like counseling or coaching or outside support are not necessary. I should just pray harder, read my Bible more, and I'll break through these problems. And so I've often said, like, the greater the influence a leader has, if unchecked, their blind spots also grow with it. So it's kind of like if your ministry grows and really flourishes, and you don't have checked blind spots where you have people speaking into those areas in your life, they'll grow out of control. And we've all seen that kind of thing. I think another reality to that point, though, Oshua, is some leaders go the other direction, where they turn their church, their ministry, their sermons into their own personal therapy sessions. And that can be
the truth.
Dangerous as well, right? Because you can kind of create some codependency with the congregation, feeling like they have to take care of you when you're in a caring role with them. So it's a weird balance there. do we have input into our lives? You know, if I'm a counselor, for example, I'm probably in some kind of a peer support group where I'm getting some input from other people or processing my caseload. As pastors, we're really reluctant to get that kind of outside support. So some of the counsel I would say is how can you put those parameters in place so that you can be healthier for the long haul, be gracious with yourself and with others. Yeah. Like you don't know the weight of what people are carrying around with them.
Yeah.
And I hear that in that story, like we could be, offended by that pastor, but there can also be a compassion towards him, and seeing the potential for growth is really hopeful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's beautiful.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.